discoveries, 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
Welcome to SPIROPICTURES, and I'm Jane Darling. And tonight, we investigate why humans seek answers to myths and legends. Myths and legends, whether they be creative or true tales, have endured through human history across all cultures. Tonight, we'll interview a modern explorer who seeks answers, who has researched myths and legends, and has gone out into the woods, into the wilderness, to find Sasquatch. That's right, Bigfoot. Hunting for Sasquatch with researcher and explorer Adam Colt. He lives in Minnesota, a land rich with the legend of Sasquatch sightings. It's full of trees, lakes, wilderness. There are plenty of places an intelligent species can remain undetected. We're going to hear about his adventures hunting for Sasquatch. So lock your doors, pull up a chair next to the roaring fire. That's what they do in the woods in Minnesota.
We are talking to Adam using satellite communications. Welcome aboard, Adam.
Adam, the first question I have is, would you like to say something about yourself, what you do, what you're interested in?
Sure.
Okay.
I work in Hudson, Wisconsin, as an audio engineer / producer, and I do a little bit of AV programming on the side as well. I've been in audio since '86. So I'm a little older than I sound, probably.
You're a youngster. You're a youngster.
Yeah.
Adam.
There you go.
Okay.
And I've done, everything from recording albums to TV and radio spots. So.
Well, aren't you also one of the organizers of the Z-Fest Film Festival?
I am. Yeah, I did that. I started that about 7 years ago. We're in our 7th year, and we've got a great turnout this year. We get about 30 to 50 teams every year competing for cash and prizes, and we've got some great sponsors like Sony and AJA, and they provide the cash and prizes, and we put on the festival.
And they are good prizes, like thousands of dollars and real prizes. And why don't you give that website as well in case someone wants to enter in that next year?
Z-Fest.com. So it's the letter Z as in zebra. And we couldn't get Z-Fest because that's a Nissan brand car, so they got that before we did.
Okay.
Z-Fest.com. And, this year we have an $8,000 color correction package as one of our prizes. So one of the prizes is worth over $8,000.
That's more than my car's worth, so definitely worth entering the festival if you like to make movies.
Yeah, and you have like a 1 in 40 chance of winning something.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad because they're going to give out the prizes for, at the end.
Yep.
So nice. Okay, now let's get into looking for Sasquatch. How did you get interested in that initially?
Well, that is a very interesting and fun story. My son was probably in 4th grade, and he comes home. He says, "Dad, I'm doing a report for oceanography," and I'm like, "Okay," like any father would. And he said, "I get to do it on the Loch Ness Monster." I'm like, "What?" And somehow he had talked his teacher into letting him do his oceanography report on a mythical creature.
That's great.
I thought it was.
That's a good teacher. That's a good teacher because, they don't know that he's not real, and they've recently found evidence that there might be some creature hiding way deep in that lake.
Exactly. So there's always that possibility that something might exist. So that got me thinking, and I was like, wow, it would be really exciting to put me and my son on an airplane and go over to Scotland and hang out by Loch Ness for a month, maybe 2, and maybe catch a glimpse of Nessie, And I thought, wow, that would be really fun, but really expensive.
Yeah.
So I started thinking a little more realistically and said, do we have anything here in the United States that would be fun to see? And that's when I realized, we have Bigfoot. We have Bigfoot here in the States. And so that's when I really started looking online for where to look for Bigfoot. Where would you go to find Bigfoot? And obviously, California is the place you want to be, and northern Oregon or Washington. And so I thought, this is a real doable trip. What do we need to do? So I started looking at more evidence online and stuff. And everyone who knows anything about Bigfoot has watched the Patterson film, which is why they call that particular creature Patty. I didn't know that it was named at the time. But when I was watching the footage, even on YouTube, back on the internet years ago, one thing that just struck me that I had never, ever put two and two together before was the fact that Bigfoot had boobs. And I'm like, what? This is a female creature? And then I started putting the story together in my head. It's like, up until that point, Bigfoot had never been seen before or photographed or, videotaped really. Seen, of course, but not no evidence presented. So here these two cowboys, and I guess one of them was, sick with cancer or something, and, only had a couple more years left. But the point is that the two cowboys are out on horseback searching for this creature. And some people say, oh, they faked it, right? And I'm like, you could ask 1,000 guys, you could ask 100,000 guys, how would you fake going about Bigfoot? And every one of them would say, well, I got to get a monkey suit, and then I got to put a basketball player in it. And not one of those guys would ever say, hey, let's put big rubber boobs on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're trying to prove to the world right now that Bigfoot does exist. And up until this point, we think it's a monster and it's, evil and big and horrific. And now we're going to put some boobs on it because that'll make it much more believable, wouldn't it? And I just, at that moment, it just clicked that, wow, this footage is really authentic. It's like there's no way two guys would have ever thought of that.
Well, and that would be a major special effects suit to make,
exactly.
To modify it like that.
Back at that time, they didn't have the silicone implants that we have today. And back at that time, they were just doing the makeup and stuff for the, Planet of the Apes movies.
Mm-hmm.
So even those rubber masks were really thick and hard to move in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where some more interesting evidence comes out, especially in that footage. They've actually analyzed it up here at the University of Minnesota. They took every single frame of it, and it's been put under a magnascope, so magnifying glass or a microscope, that's what it is. And they've redigitized it from that image, so they've got the absolute best clarity they can from that old footage. And then they made a human walk frame by frame like the creature in the footage.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that it was very difficult for even a good athlete to walk that way.
Now, how come just the body? I mean, the body's different. If it is a different, it's not a different species, but it's related to humans. And
well, not necessarily. And I'm not an expert in biology or genealogy or anything like that. But they think that Bigfoot is a descendant of Gigantopithecus, which is a giant ape, and they found bones of that ape in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a creature out there that they think that it could be a relative of, but I don't think it's a relative of us. And matter of fact, what's really interesting is in just the last couple of years, they've actually found like 5 different species of humans that have existed on this planet, not just, Homo sapiens, but there's 5 different species. And again, I don't know the names of them all.
Right. But
if you look out there, you'll find them. And, some of them are smaller, shorter creatures, and the Gigantopithecus was obviously a large, like 8 to 10 foot ape, maybe even taller. So.
How do you do the research for this? Like, is a lot of it online, or were you able to get books initially? How did you? There couldn't have been a whole lot of information available. How did you?
Well, once you start telling people that you're interested in a subject, whether it be knitting or, Star Trek or Bigfoot or whatever, what they get you for every birthday and Christmas and holiday is gifts of that nature. So I've been given several books on Bigfoot, but I really enjoy watching all the documentaries out there on Bigfoot.
Yeah, there's more now, and there's quite a bit available, online now that you can have access to.
Absolutely.
Well, now in your research, before we get into you actually going out in the woods, because you live in Minnesota, don't you?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So there's plenty of opportunities available to go searching. Have there been sightings in Minnesota, or most of them in the Northwest?
You know what? That's what I always thought. There hadn't been a lot of sightings here in Minnesota. And then the Bigfoot hunters did a show here in Minnesota, and they found a hot spot, and they went and interviewed some people that had seen it. But I got a chance to work with another TV film crew last year, and we got to re-interview a lot of those witnesses that were there. And so when you hear these people, and they age and range from early 30s up into their late 60s, 70s, and it's hard to believe. It's hard not to believe a grandma when she says, "Yep, I was standing right here, and it was standing right there," and she's telling you the whole story face to face in person.
Okay.
And you're not going to look at grandma and go, "You're a liar."
Yeah, not like a bunch of boys that were out on a frat party or something out in the woods.
Exactly. And these people that have seen it, it's really affected their lives in the sense that, maybe not on a day-to-day basis, but on the sense that they know something that the rest of us don't know.
Right.
We have to take it on faith, and they're like, "Nope, I know it's legit. I saw it."
They believe they saw it, or they saw something.
Exactly.
Okay. Now,
And not only do they see it, but they smell it.
oh,
That's another thing too.
okay.
It,
Did they mention like some of the details, like what town was that near, and like some of the details of when you'd interview them? Like you had a crew and you were filming this, you'd go up and knock on their door and start talking to them?
Yeah, and again, I was just part of the crew.
Right.
So I was, kind of doing sound and lights,
Okay.
helping out with that stuff. So I didn't arrange all the shoots.
Okay.
And I did not have direct access to all of the information.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I was there, but they throw us in a car, and we caravan up there with a bunch of cars and all the gear, and it's like we stop, we unload, we get set up, we mic up all the people, and then we start shooting. And it's really, you look around, and you're like, where am I? What town did we just pass through?
Okay.
So,
Was it all
but I
wooded
can tell you
areas?
The hot spot, yeah, it's not all wooded areas too. That's the amazing thing.
Okay, that's
the hot
interesting.
spot is along the Kettle River in Minnesota.
Okay.
So it's just about an hour and a half, 2 hours north of the Twin Cities. And all up and down the Kettle River, there's been a lot of sightings.
Okay. Now, are these populated places or sparsely
Yeah.
populated? Oh, really?
Sparsely populated, but they're populated.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're in northern Minnesota, there's a lot of farmland up there.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got, a mile or two between houses and stuff like that because, there's a farmhouse and then the silos and the barns and all the other stuff and a bunch of land, and then you drive and then there's the next farmhouse.
Okay.
You know?
So
it's not like they're right up on top of each other.
okay. So if this species evolved differently than us, and it's not by accident they want to stay hidden. I mean, they know we're here.
I think they're really
and lots of
intelligent,
us.
and I think they don't want us to see them.
I
But what's
can't blame
interesting
them.
that I find is when we do see them, they don't normally run away. They just get up and walk off.
Okay.
It's not like they're scared of us or, like we're the top of the food chain to them, but they're just like, no, we don't want to be here right now. I don't want to have to deal with this.
Okay.
I'm walking away.
So, I mean, they're smart enough to stay well hidden if they want to. It's not by accident.
Yeah, I think they're even smarter than that too.
Okay. Okay. Now, has anyone ever seen baby Sasquatches? Smaller ones that might be children, or are they all the full-grown ones?
And they call them juveniles, and
Okay.
there's been multiple juvenile sightings.
Okay.
One of the ones that I thought was interesting was a news report out of New York, and I'm like, "There's Bigfoot in New York?" And they were just shooting a television anchor, a reporter talking about something, and in the background you see a Bigfoot basically pass through the shot for a couple of frames, and while it's passing through, something jumps off of its back and into the trees.
Oh. Okay.
So there's that footage. And again, things like that would be really, why would you fake them? You're there doing a job, you're shooting a newscast, why would you have, let's put a Bigfoot in the background so we have to all work harder.
Yeah, with a child. I mean, or a juvenile.
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
let's make sure this child can jump into a tree and nobody cares about its safety right now.
Okay. Now, Adam, What kind of evidence, besides sightings, is there other evidence that these creatures are out there? The footprints,
well, they've got
they've got
the
that?
footprints and the foot castings. They do castings of the prints. So they pour a plaster of Paris in the hole, and they remove that. And what's interesting is a lot of times, if you don't take that plaster mold home and wash it off and look at it all like, wow, this is fantastic. Sometimes, and this is what Bigfoot researchers are learning, is like, don't wash that off because the dirt that you have in the cast may have hair follicles in it.
Okay.
And some of those hair follicles might have genetic material. But what's even more impressive is that if you think the footprints are fake, they actually have fingerprints and toe prints, but they have ridge lines in the castings. And after somebody analyzed the ridge lines, they realized that, hey, these ridge lines are moving exactly opposite of humans. So even if you took a mold of a human foot and enlarged it, you'd never be able to make the ridge lines go the other way. You'd really have to know a lot about, apes and stuff to know that their ridge lines don't go the same way as our ridge lines.
Well, that would have been my next question. Do apes have ridge lines like we do? And fingerprints? They must.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they do.
Okay. That's
So,
interesting. Okay.
I know. So when you think about hoaxing this stuff, you really have to think about all the things that go into it.
Yeah, you'd have to put fingerprints on there somehow and know to do that somehow.
And not only know that, but know how to twist them and elongate them and reorient
Fake
them.
Yeah, fake them.
And to fake them to that extent. And if you even look at the original Patterson footage that we were talking about, one of the things they've discovered recently is the muscle tone. So if you were wearing a suit, you'd literally have to have it glued to your leg for them to see any sort of muscle flexing. Otherwise, the suit just dangles like a pair of pants. So they see the muscle tone underneath the hair. And the other thing that they have made comment of is that the forearm is disproportionate to a human. So it's a couple inches longer from the elbow to the wrist than our arms.
Okay.
And if you were to fake that, you'd have to make a gorilla suit with a mechanical arm in there so you'd be able to move the fingers.
Okay, so it would
And
look
that would
much
take
longer. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. That would take a lot of extra work. And then they made a conical head. So the head actually has a little bit of a cone dome on the top of it.
Those are the types of pictures that I have seen, is with the cone.
Yeah, and most people don't understand that that's the shape of the ape's head versus our head is more round and flat,
Okay.
So to fake that as a 1960s cowboy, you'd have to know, okay, we're going to put boobs on it. We've got to make sure that they jiggle like real, flesh.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to make the arms longer, especially in the wrist. We're going to make it walk with a different lift angle than a human being, because every human being has the same lift angle when they lift up their leg.
Okay.
And there's a different angle for Bigfoot, which is why they walk differently than us. And then, we're going to have to make sure that when it looks at the camera, which is when you're filming something, you say, don't look at the camera. That's like one of the first lines.
Mm-hmm.
When it turns to look at the camera, the thing that you notice is that it doesn't turn just its head, it turns its whole upper torso. And if you talk to an ape expert, a gorilla expert, they'll say that their necks aren't as long as ours, so when they turn their head, they have to turn their torso because their chin would brush against their shoulder.
Oh, okay.
So the cowboys who faked this would have to have known all of that to do the fake that they made.
And that would have to be an educated cowboy. So not to make fun of cowboys, but back in the 60s, they would have had to plan this for a long time and do a lot of research to be able to
and spend a lot of
well.
money on that, on making that suit.
Yes.
There's a thing called a flicker test, I believe, and the astronomers have been using it to find stars. Because if you take a picture of a night sky and then you take a picture a second later, and then you put the two pictures, you flash them back and forth,
mm-hmm.
anything that flickers or goes on and off or moves is something that's in orbit of our solar system. So that's how they find local bodies that are moving. They do the flicker test, and they did the flicker test on the breasts of the Bigfoot, and they realized that it had a natural human-like movement instead of fixed rubber, or
I
so
see.
it would have been really hard to fake that movement in a 1960s gorilla suit.
It's fascinating. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know. So
Yeah, and I'm kind of a generalist. I don't have a lot of specific details because I'm kind of a wannabe, and I haven't,
Okay.
I don't do all the legit research that people do.
yeah, but you
I
know
do
enough.
know-
What you do
yeah.
have here is passion for the topic. You don't need to be an expert, but someone that's enough interested in it that you go to extra lengths to find information, and that you have an imagination to, kind of extrapolate the information that you do have, and that's what's interesting. There's a lot of
I
details.
gather all this information from a variety of sources, and I put them together into form a coherent picture of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's really
So
interesting.
you're talking about evidence. They've got foot castings. They've got genetic hair samples that have been tested and come up as unknown mammal. They have scat samples, and like I said, they've got the dermal ridge lines in the foot castings that helps prove it. So if you had to go to court, I think they'd have enough evidence to prove that there's something there.
Okay.
So
Have there been things found like tools? Not our tools, of course, but tools they would use, and fire. Do they use fire? I mean, apes don't use fire, so
that's a great question. And no, and as far as I know, they haven't found any tools or any fire. But what they do find is stick formation and nesting. They find where.
Can
they,
you describe
where
what they
down.
look like, or what if people believe that these are from Bigfoot,
Right.
what they look like?
Generally, nests are found in bushes. Like they're hidden away, so they go into the center of the bushes basically, and they lay down on the bushes. So it looks like crushed bush, inside, matted forest material. It's all matted down.
Okay.
And that's their bedding. And the stick figures, they're usually just bent over trees, but they're done in such a way that it's very unusual. And again, this is speculation. No one's seen a Bigfoot build a stick figure in the woods, but there's a lot of people like, why is this branch broken off at 8.5 feet? Why would somebody get out a ladder, go up and break a branch off way up there when they could break it down lower, easier?
Okay.
When they build these formations, there's little telltale signs that say, maybe this wasn't done by a 5.5 foot or 6 foot human.
Well, and now the ones that are up in the trees, why would they be breaking the branches? Are they using it as a place to live or hide?
The juveniles do the tree thing, as far as I know. I think when you're talking about a 600 to 800 pound creature, I don't think they're up in the trees all that often.
They're too big. Okay.
Yeah.
So if they're hairy,
they push trees over.
Go ahead.
I just said they push trees over, and they break trees quite often, but I don't think they climb trees.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking, for the size that they are, they might tangle with a bear, but other animals are probably going to leave them alone.
Yeah, they're definitely the top of the food chain.
That's what I'm thinking. So they could survive. I'm thinking how they could survive and stay hidden. And if they're smart enough, they can stay hidden. And as far as surviving, they're big enough that they're not going to be food for most predators. And
correct.
And they'd stay warm enough, and they're just used to living in the woods. And
yep, exactly.
Okay.
And now here's an interesting story that you brought up bears. There was a story in Alaska of two fishermen who were on a boat, and they look over, and it's not uncommon, but they saw a bear come down to the water's edge to drink, right? Maybe
Yes.
catch a fish. But then they saw something kind of unusual. They saw the bear sniff the air and take alert, stand up on its hind legs and really take a good sniff, and then the bear took off really fast.
Oh.
Okay?
Okay.
Seconds later, a Bigfoot came out of the woods and came down to the water's edge to get a drink.
Okay.
So it seems to me that bears know their smell, and bears are like, no, we don't tangle with those guys.
Okay. Yeah, well, they're as big and smarter, or for whatever reason, they might be able to, harm it, and they know that. So that's interesting.
So I really don't think they have anything to worry about in the woods.
Okay. And smart enough. See, and I'm still on there, smart enough to stay hidden because, with a lot of equipment available today, you could go in the woods and start looking, for heat signatures and things like that. But
Yeah.
there could be a
That
lot.
brings up an interesting point, too. On one of the episodes of Bigfoot Hunters, one of the guys put a candy bar out and put a thermal camera near it and basically waited and left and waited for the Bigfoot to come out and take the bait. Well, the Bigfoot did come out and take the bait, but it didn't just walk up and grab the candy bar and walk away. It took hours and hours for it to kind of sneak up and take the candy bar and then leave. Okay?
So it's,
Point is,
it's careful.
so it's very careful and it's very smart, and it knows, maybe it didn't know there was a camera there, maybe it did and just wanted the candy bar, but in the end, what it proves is that it's very, cautious, very smart, and that evidence is not great evidence because you can't tell on a thermal camera exactly what it is.
Right, right.
You can see the heat signature hiding in the woods, dodging out between trees, and you can see that it's sneaking up on the candy bar really slowly over 3.5, 4 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that's interesting because it's like if you had a guy in a monkey suit and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put this camera here. You're going to pretend you're Bigfoot. You're going to sneak up, steal the candy bar, and go away, right?
Right. Probably wouldn't behave that way. Probably.
No actor would take all night to sneak up on a candy bar.
Like a live animal or a live creature. That.
They wouldn't have the patience to do that. They're going to be at night. They're in the woods. It's going to be a little freaky. They're going to be cold. They're going to want to get out there, go home and climb in bed. It's like, no, let me just sneak up, take the candy bar, and go. Right?
And it wouldn't be his first candy bar if it was an actor, so he would know exactly how to open it up and, take off.
And I don't even know if it opened it on camera. See, that's the other thing. It
just
kind
took
of
off.
It and left.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
another thing too, because you might have an actor come up and eat the candy bar right in front of the camera if you were faking it.
Right. Right.
Exactly. See all these things that you
the details.
It's enough to make you wonder.
It's
exactly.
the details it's the details that make you consider it's a real creature, not an actor faking it, because we sort of have an idea of what actors would do. Now, Adam,
actors usually do what directors tell them to do, so there's usually more than one person in on it.
Yeah.
A lot of things like, okay,
Yes.
I want you to turn this way, I want you to go from here over there, in this amount of time, and do these things.
Okay, I got another question for you, Adam. You said there's a difference between Yetis and Bigfoot. Can you just point out what some of those differences are?
Well, the Yeti and the Abominable Snowman, the shows that I've seen on that, obviously it's been around for quite a while, and the monks revere that creature.
And they're in Tibet, right? Tibet and Nepal, up in the mountains.
Nepal, exactly, yeah. And they revere it, and they said they had a hand of one of the creatures that's in there, in a glass case in one of their monasteries or whatever. But that creature over there is obviously different in color, usually white in color.
Yes. Okay.
And there are different colors over there too, of course. But I think it's more aggressive because they have lots of stories of it, running after people and chasing people and ripping apart livestock and stuff. Now that's not to say that our counterpart here doesn't hunt, because there's been stories of the Bigfoot here hunting in packs, and they do take down deer. They snap their front legs.
Oh.
That
was one of my questions. If they're meat eaters, they'd almost have to be if they're large animals like that. They can't really get enough, especially, especially living in winter climates, you wouldn't be able to get enough plants to eat.
And they do eat lichen and stuff that just naturally grows in abundance on trees.
Okay.
So they do eat stuff that we don't eat. But they also theoretically they migrate, and they so that they might eat a path through the territory they're walking through, and then head back to their.
Interesting. So do they think that they stay together as a tribe and live as a tribe?
I don't think there's a lot of information on the social groups.
They just don't know. Okay.
Well, they don't know, but here's a couple stories that tell us a little bit. There's some hunters in Texas that shot what they thought was a bear, but they realized it wasn't a bear, and they followed it into a bush, and they were all too afraid to go into the bush at night, so they all headed back, and they thought, we wounded it pretty bad. It's probably going to die in there, because I think they had like 3 hunters shooting at it all at the same time. And then they got back the next day, and they found the bush and the blood, and they wandered. One of the hunters was brave enough to climb into the bush to see if it was still alive or not. And when he got in there, what he found was really interesting. He found the dead male being coddled by a female. And he was obviously startled to find, that, the male was in there dead, and what it was, because they didn't know exactly what it was. They knew when they shot at it, they thought it was a bear, but then they realized it wasn't a bear, but they continued firing anyway. But when the hunter was in the bush, he got startled by the female, and he was close up to her with his gun prepared, because he was waiting for the wounded male to attack him, and he was able to kill the female as well. But instead of bringing the bodies into science, they said they thought they were going to go to jail because
that's the story I heard. Yeah, that
they looked so human.
They were human enough that they thought they killed people.
Right.
And we're going to get in
Strange
trouble for
woodland
it.
people.
I
Exactly.
know.
And if you shot somebody, you don't really know how you would act. So you can't blame them for not saying, we shot these 2 people out in the woods. Here you go. I feel like going to jail for the rest of my life.
Yeah. When they could leave them there and get away with it.
Exactly. Which is, they buried them, and they went back later, and I don't know why they couldn't find them, but it's one of those things that
that's one of the stories that I heard. It was classic conspiracy. They had a consistent story about what happened, but that they went back and they couldn't find them.
But that tells you a little bit about the behavior. So it sounds like they have family units. Sounds like there's a male-female bonding there. And
well,
then
that's too bad then that they got. I mean, if there's not a lot of these creatures around, and then somebody shoots them.
Right.
Yeah.
There's not a lot, but I think they say there's over 3,500 to 4,000.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So
just from sightings. Just from sightings, they're able to.
Population.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And there's sightings all over the place. With scientists and cops and teachers and children.
Like what parts of the country?
If you go to BFRO, that's the Bigfoot Field Research Organization.
Okay.
They have a map with all the sightings that they've had told to them. Now
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know those guys very well, but I think what they do is they keep all the current sightings to themselves and investigate them, and then years later they'll put them up.
Oh, interesting.
So
okay.
I don't think they give you the current data because they want to keep it to themselves so they can go investigate it.
Well, they probably want to find one first, I'm sure. They want the find
absolutely.
first.
They put a lot of time and energy
Sure.
into this, but if you tell the world where to go look, there's going to be a lot of people descending on that, and any evidence that is there is going to get destroyed by people tromping through.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, Adam, do you have any current or new investigations that you have planned to do anytime soon?
There is a group here in Minnesota. I have been invited to go out with them. I might do that sometime this summer, but I'm not really a tromp into the woods in the middle of winter guy. And,
no way. Not in Minnesota. Yeah.
No, we just had 9 inches come down yesterday, so it was. It's been winter here is strange. Sometimes it's not too bad. Sometimes it's horrible. So.
Yeah. Well, it's legendary how bad it is. So, I wouldn't go in the woods in the winter either. Okay, Adam, do you have other stories about that I missed? Stuff. Those were some of the questions that I had, but you might have other stuff that you want to say about.
Well, I just want to talk a little bit about what I think their intelligence level is.
Okay.
There's a thing that people have heard that they call ninja speak.
Ninja?
And it's basically ninja speak.
Okay.
Yeah, or exactly. And it's basically a low guttural Asian-sounding language. And more than one person has heard this when they've run into a Bigfoot. There was a story of a a guy who was, fishing and went down to the riverbank, looked upstream, 20 feet upstream, there was a Bigfoot there, and they startled each other. And then the Bigfoot literally started talking to the guy, and not in English, of course, but he was using this low, guttural, Asian-flavored language. And then some people say they've actually recorded that. But when witnesses keep saying the same thing over and over again, you kind of tend to believe it. So I think they do have a language of their own. And what's interesting about it is that through history, there's been several bodies that have been theoretically, captured or put on display. There was one that was theoretically in the basement of some warehouse in Russia. So why hasn't this come to light? And I think that it's one of those things that if you did find a body and you didn't take it directly to the media and you took it to a governmental agency or something else, I think it would disappear. I think you'd have trouble proving that you found your Bigfoot corpse. Even if you just had a couple of hair samples and maybe a couple of photos, a lot of people would be able to discredit that and say, you know what, there are a lot of people say they've got Bigfoot hair, and that's true today.
Yes.
But I think the biggest thing that threatens us is the fact that here we have another bipedal, humanoid-looking creature, and if it's found out to have its own language and family units, it's way closer to us than a lot of other creatures.
Yeah, it's an indigenous species. It's indigenous population. And language is a sign of intelligence, the fact that they have a language, because that's how they can transmit stories from the past into the future. This with a spoken language or, of course, a written language, same thing. But that's interesting.
Yeah, so here you've got opposable thumbs, upright walking, language, like I said, family units, all this stuff makes them the closest thing to human that there is.
Yeah.
And that would really be like, wow, if a creature like that could evolve on this planet and we could live alongside of it and really not know about it, then I think the door is kind of wide open for creatures evolving on other planets with bipedal and opposable thumbs. And, it really kind of opens the door to a whole other thing. It's like, we got alien life right here on Earth.
That we don't know about. Yeah.
Yeah. Why couldn't it be somewhere else? And
and they would have migrated the same way humans migrated. To here. They didn't come on boats. They came when the
land bridge.
Land broke up. Or were able to.
Or when it froze over.
Yeah, when it froze over, and they could walk over. Yeah.
Yeah, but who knows? I mean, there's ancient cave paintings in Northern California that are dated well over 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
That have, oxen and, horses and Bigfoot in the cave paintings. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just know language is a big intelligence feature.
Mm-hmm.
In evolved species, and and if they're not waging war on people, who's more evolved? If they're not killing the neighboring tribe, maybe we're the barbarians, invading their space. So
well, when the electricity goes out and everyone has to figure out how to fend for themselves, I know they definitely have an upper hand over us.
No kidding. Yeah, they don't need clothes, and they know where to get food and water and hide. Yeah. So it's pretty good.
There is a story that...
Hold that thought. We got a caller. Lazarus, what's going on?
I have a question for our guest, if that's all right. I am in the basement of an abandoned warehouse. We think the aliens are dormant and we are waiting for them to take off again. I was listening to the show and thought I would give you a ring. My question is, should there be an official species designation for this creature? If the closest living relative of humans, Homo sapiens, are the chimpanzee, they appear to be more so than these. Bigfoot is biped, language, complex brain and complex societies. With their intelligence, they could easily be our closest living relative. Is that true?
So there's a story about a woman and I really wish I could remember all these names of places, but she's in the South, and she grew up on a farm where they've had Bigfoot visitations her whole life.
Oh.
And there's like a family of them that live
Okay, now
on their
where's
property.
this? What state is this in? Do you know?
I think it's South Carolina.
Oh, okay. So, okay. It's a different part of the
right,
country. Okay.
I know. They're all over the place. And, you know, obviously Florida has them, the skunk ape.
A lot of trees. There's a lot of places to
Alaska.
hide.
Exactly. They're all over the place. And I didn't really think they were here in Minnesota until I talked to a lot of the witnesses there. But so anyways, this woman had interactions with these Bigfoot through her whole life. And they, you know, the Bigfoot knew that they weren't going to harm her, and she knew they weren't, you know, vice versa. And she actually has a story of conversing with the Bigfoot, where it actually like learned rudimentary language and was able to come to her door and ask for things.
Oh,
And
wow.
when I know, and I think garlic was one of the things he asked for, or something like that. But yeah, it was really interesting to hear, like, you know. But that goes so far over the edge to say, yeah, not only do I know about Bigfoot, but yeah, I talked to Bigfoot, and they actually come and ask me for stuff. And when you go that far to tell a story like that, she's had some Bigfoot researchers go down and investigate and talk to her, and maybe they found a couple footprints on her land or something, but nothing really to establish it. Then you kind of cross the line, like saying, you know, I'm really nuts because I'm talking to Bigfoot.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm hanging out with Bigfoot.
Yeah.
You're kind of crazy when you say you have seen a Bigfoot, but
then to
I
have
love the fact that
it would ask for things.
Exactly. I love the fact that we're getting to the point now where we believe there's stuff
That
we
it's
don't know about.
possible. That it's
Exactly.
possible because there's stuff we don't know about. There's a lot of stuff
Every
we
day
don't
we
know
find
about.
new species of plants and animals on the planet that we didn't know existed. You know, a giant squid might wash up on shore, or a
Right.
prehistoric-looking fish that no one knew about. You know, so it's kind of like opening our eyes, like, hey, we're not as smart as we think we are, and maybe there's a possibility. So if you say you saw a Bigfoot, it probably wouldn't last.
It can
You're
happen.
Like, oh, yeah, where?
Well, and the other...
My
Go ahead.
Go ahead. My masseuse, I was talking about Bigfoot, and he was like, oh, yeah, I used to live out in California. I've seen him. And I'm like, what? I mean, I would love to see one.
it'd be great.
Crazy, though, because
It'd be great.
no one would believe me anyways. It's like, whatever. But anyways, he's telling me about how he was, ready for this? There was a giant pot farm
Of
in
course.
Northern California, and he was in charge, you know, of overlooking it at night and stuff. So he had his tent set up on the hill, and, you know, he had a latrine down at the bottom of the hill and a bunch of other stuff going on. So he was like, one night, these guys were in the woods yelling at each other, and he could hear 3 or 4 of them. So
Bigfoot?
he just stayed, yeah.
Oh, that were however signaling each other, and they were in the pot in the marijuana field.
They were around the marijuana field, correct? Yeah. And he was in his tent, and he was just like, I don't know what that is. I don't want to know what it is. It's not a bear. I know it's not a bear. And then he said that it came over, and he could smell it.
Oh,
He's
okay.
like, you wouldn't believe what it smelled like.
What do people say that it smells like if they smell one?
Really musky, dirty, earthy, you know, body odor. You know, just it's a pretty horrific smell from what I've heard.
Okay.
So, you know, it's probably what we would smell like if we didn't take showers
Okay.
for a month and a half.
Well, and they have fur, so, you know.
And they have fur, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And they probably, you know, they don't have toilet paper.
Right. Like
They have
animals.
fur.
Yeah, like animals.
Exactly.
Now,
No,
so
it's not
did
fur,
he?
though. It's not fur. It's hair.
Oh, it's actual hair. It's not fur. That's
Yeah, it's
different.
hair.
Okay, it's hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, yeah, it's not fur. It's definitely hair. And they have found what they consider, you know, as pretty authentic, you know, hair samples that have been genetically tested.
Okay.
And they come up as unknown mammals.
It's hair, though, because there's a difference between hair and fur. Now,
Definitely.
Did he think that the Bigfoots were taking the marijuana, perhaps eating it? They don't have to smoke it. You can eat it. Did they know? I mean, they would know what plants you could eat. They would know that.
I don't think they cared about the marijuana. I think they wanted him out of their area.
I see. They're trying to scare him off.
I think they were, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and,
Well, is it legal in California or not? Is it not legal?
At the time, I don't know how long ago it was, but it doesn't sound like it was legal.
Okay.
So,
Because I'm in Colorado. All that stuff's legal now, certain amounts of it. So people can grow it in their backyard if they want to. So, and they do. They do. Yeah, I think you can have 6 plants in your backyard, something per person. So, yeah, it's very popular here.
Moving to Colorado, I guess.
Or gummy bears, Maybe Bigfoot likes gummy bears. But, okay, that's interesting. Okay, Adam. If you have more stories you want.
I have one more story.
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear it, because these are fascinating stories.
Remembering these things.
Okay.
I went up and interviewed a witness in northern Minnesota who had a similar story, too, because they had a farmhouse on the back of a river system, and they were building a guest house about a quarter of a mile, maybe a half a mile away from their main house, so they could rent that out for people that just wanted to take a break in the middle of the woods.
Okay.
And they were building it, and while they were building it, they said they were charged by a Bigfoot, that basically the same thing wanted them out of that area. Here they are with their power tools making all this noise building this house.
Right.
And they hear this creature screaming and yelling and running up the shallow creek bed, right towards their direction. And they got a glimpse of it, and they were terrified. I talked to these guys, and these were big guys. They didn't have any guns or anything, but they had power tools, and they
would be making a racket if they were out in the woods in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, they were making a racket.
Did they continue on the house, or did they think it would be too dangerous to stay there?
They finished it. Yeah,
okay.
They did. I don't know. I don't know if it ever came back again, but man, they said it was really angry, and it was charging them, and it wanted them off of that property.
Because that would be, if you were, if you had property up in the mountains and some creature really did that while you were building something there, I'd think twice about hanging out there, because would you go hiking? You can't carry a bear rifle with you. And
the funny thing is, though, I've never ever heard a story about a human being killed by a Bigfoot.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I've never heard that. I've heard stories of them killing. There was a story of a Bigfoot who was chasing down a jogger who was jogging through nature trails in the woods there, who had his dog with him, and the dog attacked the Bigfoot, protecting the owner, and the Bigfoot killed the dog. But I've never heard stories of Bigfoot actually coming up to humans and killing humans.
Okay.
So.
Okay, interesting. Huh.
So I don't think I think they scare them more. They're more aggressive. They're towards getting you off or out of their area.
Yeah, especially if you're hiking, or a lot of the areas are remote. Not some of them were not so remote, but
that was in Washington. That story happened where the dog got killed. So. Okay. And there's lots of trails through the woods in Washington up there. So.
Okay. Well, Adam, let's see. We're going on probably over 45 minutes, so that's plenty, and I can use most of this. I'm still recording, but I can cut it out, so that's not a problem.
So did they answer all your questions, or most?
Yeah, no, I had a list of questions here. I was gonna. My next question was, what's next for you? You're gonna do the Bigfoot hunt. I shouldn't say hunt, because you're not actually hunting them. You're researching. You're a researcher. This summer, then, with a group.
That would be fun. I don't know exactly when. This year's a really busy travel year for me, so I don't know if I'll be able to.
After you do that, let's talk again, and, we can do another podcast about what that was like.
Fantastic.
Okay. Can you think of anything else you'd want to say about Bigfoot? Because this is really interesting. I've never known anyone, and I've heard stories about you doing this, and I've never known anyone who really has, gone out in the woods and actually talked to people.
I said, between me and you, it's like I'm not much of a Bigfoot hunter. I'm more of a city boy wannabe. I've only been out a couple of times, and I haven't really seen anything yet. I've never seen a footprint in real life, but again, I've had the luxury of talking to a couple eyewitnesses who have.
And being in the place where they actually saw it.
Exactly,
too.
Yep.
Yeah.
On site, exactly.
Okay.
And, one of the guys that I work with on the television series, he's a real nature guy, and he's got a couple of horses, and he always goes riding and stuff like that. And he has a story of being on the beach and having rocks thrown at him all night. And, you know, when you get down to it, it's like bears don't throw rocks.
No. No.
You know, so unless someone decided that throwing rocks at somebody else for hours on end was an exciting thing to do, which I don't know anything that find that fun for hours. And there's tons of stories about. One of the best stories is a famous story about a naturalist who was out in doing a survey on mountain goats or goat migration or something, and he spilled bacon grease on his tent. And later that night, he heard something sniffing his tent. He thought it was a bear. He smacked at the side of the tent to shoo it off, and instead of hitting a soft nose, he hit like a hard kneecap or something. And then he looked up and he saw the shadow of it of a giant hand over the top of his tent, and it, you know, had 5 fingers with an opposable thumb, and bears don't have that either.
Yeah, and it was really big. Well, who doesn't like bacon? Yeah. You know, that's
right, exactly. That is my plan, actually, to go out in the woods with a grill and cook bacon.
Yeah, start cooking food. Yeah, cooking. Well, see, and they're smart enough to know that they can probably get food if they're around us. They can get food as long as they're, you know, they sneak it, so they're not detected.
Yeah.
So
and if they're close enough to farmland, they can get corn, and they can, you know, maybe get some of the animals that they farm.
Sure.
You know, so there's food sources there that we're providing for them.
Yeah, and you know, on those large farms, the animals get to, you know, their range. You know, they're out on a range. You can snatch one easy. They expect to lose some of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, thank you. This was really interesting, and it's fun to talk about a possible new species right here on this planet that
exactly
that people are
one that may talking.
Yeah.
Like us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
I think
Thank you.
A lot of people see that as a threat, but I
don't either. I find it interesting and fascinating because there's not any different than going to another planet, looking and seeing what's there. It's the same thing.
Speaking of other planets, I hear that your podcast is about science fiction.
This is science fiction content, and although we're going to do, you know, it's for creative people that want to do their own movies and stories, music. So that's the focus of this. But it still leans towards science fiction. And that's actually where this would end up for 2 reasons. Because it's, you know, it's a passionate interest of yours that requires, you know, some tenacity and imagination to pursue it. And it's interesting. And it could be an interesting story if somebody wanted to take this, you know, the stories even that you've told or that they can research about Bigfoot and, you know, turn that into a movie or novel. That's possible. So
absolutely.
That's what I'm trying to do.
And find some new evidence and share that with
Yes.
people.
Yeah, real evidence. You know, and eventually, you know, they will be detected. Maybe not caught if they're smart enough not to get caught, but at least that there'll be real evidence that can detect that there is another species out there staying well hidden from us.
That is one thing that if you get somebody crazy enough to plan a capture of Bigfoot, it's like, you know, you want to try to take them live if you can, but even if you killed one, how would you get it out of the woods? I mean, how do you get 800 pounds out of wood?
Well, and really, they shouldn't be out there killing them. They're, you know, if they're an endangered species, there can't be that many of them. You just don't go out there and start killing them. They're not doing anything.
There is one city that's tried to outlaw killing them, even though they don't know for sure they exist. They're like, okay, killing Bigfoot is illegal here.
That's interesting. Well, you know, when I watch Creature from the Black Lagoon, I don't know if you've seen that movie. Have you seen that?
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay. It is so politically incorrect. I'm sure when the movie was made, that seemed feasible, what they were doing. They go out into this, I can't remember where they were, maybe, I'm not sure they ever said where they were. They were out in some jungle, you know, some mythical jungle somewhere, looking where this thing had been sighted, and then they capture it and then bring it back. And it was a sentient creature, so it wasn't like just the large fish. It was like this man-fish thing. And to watch it today in modern times, it's so politically correct to do that. It's like, you can't just go capture something and drag it back here, you know?
Well,
we don't do that. We don't allow that. And then they were, shooting at it, like going to kill it. And it's like, you can't just start killing things like that. It's very different today than it was when that movie was made 50 years ago.
I wish it was different today.
Yeah, that's true. It's not always true.
That's what's going to have to happen, though, because I don't care how much video footage you have. I don't care how many hair samples or scat samples or foot castings
Somebody
you have.
wants to bring one
No
back.
one is going to believe you until you actually bring the body back.
And it seems wrong to do that. If it's an intelligent
Yeah.
creature, you just can't go out there and start shooting at them to bring one
Right,
back.
exactly.
But somebody will,
No.
probably because they think it's a bear or something else, I guess, or feel threatened. Feel threatened, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Hunters with guns are the ones that are going to be able to kill them, out there, not because they're out there to kill a Bigfoot, but they're out there to hunt something else.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I hate to
but
see them get harmed.
This is a reminder to all the hunters listening to your show. It's like, when you get it, you better drive it straight to a television station and not to a government agency.
Right, and exactly, and keep it refrigerated and everything. Okay, thanks, Adam. I appreciate
You're
it.
very, very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Mr. Colt, I have been on dozens of UFO crash site retrievals and I have never seen one. We often go to remote locations. I would be interested to go on an expedition sometime with you. Perhaps the creature would not fear me since I am not human and would smell different. We don't know. Don't forget to contact me next summer, Mr. Colt.
And seriously, if you go out on that thing this summer, let's talk again. And
Absolutely.
just to get more details on what it's like. So you eventually might want to do a book, or I mean just on the adventure of investigating a myth and a legend, because that's what you're doing. Except there's starting to be evidence that it's not a myth and a legend. Thanks, Adam. Nice meeting you. Good night.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.